Okay, welcome everybody to another edition of Squash Canada's Coach PD webinar series. We're very excited to have you with us today to see a presentation on tactical decision-making in squash, how coaches can help their players to make better in-match decisions. We think this will be a very valuable presentation and how, with respect to how you can implement your coaching in a game. And we have three very educated and experienced presenters with us today who are going to talk to you about this great topic. So first, we've got Dave Cooper, who comes to us as a associate professor emeritus from the teaching stream with the Faculty of Kinesiology and Phys Ed at the U of T. And actually, I think he is retired now. So he comes with a ton of experience. He is also infamous for coaching the U of T Varsity Blues women's squash team to a number of OUA titles. So he has got a ton of valuable experience in both teaching and coaching. We have also with us today, Mike Way, who has more than 30 years of coaching professional and amateur squash players, including former world champions Jonathan Power and Sarah Fitzgerald. Mike is also a coach down at Harvard and has had amazing success down there as well. And then finally with us today, Carleen Headley Cooper, who is a physical and health education teacher at the Crofton House School in Vancouver, BC. And she too has participated as a player with the University of Toronto Varsity Blues and has had a number of successes winning medals for the OUA a number of times. So we welcome Dave, Mike, and Carleen. A couple of quick ground rules for today. This is a very informative presentation, so we'd ask that you keep your questions to the end. There will be time for questions. Carleen and I will kind of facilitate those later on. If you want to type them in the chat early, feel free, or save them to the end, that's fine. We ask you to keep your mics and your webcams muted so that Dave and Mike and Carleen can keep the presentation moving. Otherwise, we look forward to today's presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave, Carleen, and Mike. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dave Cooper, and I'd just like to thank Jeff for allowing us to make this presentation and for the audience for taking time out of their day to listen to it. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that I'm presenting from in the region of Peel is part of the treaty lands and territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, and that for thousands of years, Indigenous peoples inhabited and cared for this land and continue to do so. So our presentation today, as Jeff said, is tactical decision-making in squash, how coaches can help their players to make better in-match decisions. So all of today's presentations come from the book that you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, which Dr. Barry Gordon from the University of Victoria in Wellington, New Zealand, and I co-edited and co-authored, and Mike and Carleen contributed chapters to the book, and this was published by Routledge UK in 2020, so it's pretty up to date. I will start with a quick introduction to tactical decision making by talking about what type of an environment enables squash players to take ownership of their performance in practice and competitive matches. Mike will then follow on with sharing examples of how he encourages his Harvard University squash players to become better competitive decision makings. Then Carleen and Mike will lead into the Q&A session, with Carleen asking Mike about his role as the coach in competitive matches, which will open up the floor as we go on to your comments and questions. So if we look very quickly at the coaching environment, so I'd like to preface this by telling you a true story that Carleen and Mike have heard before, so they'll have to bear with me, which comes from about 12 years ago when I was head coach of the Varsity Blues team. And as part of our program, we often went to club tournaments. We were playing in a tournament, and it may have been one, I think, run by Rob Brooks. one of my middle ranked players reached the final by winning their game on the Saturday evening and moved into the final on the Sunday. But unfortunately, I couldn't attend the final. But I met with the player after the game and we knew who she was playing and she'd beaten her. And we talked about a couple of things and we both felt really confident that this would be okay. So on Monday, when I bumped into her, she was looking a bit sheepish. And I said, "How'd you get on, Cammy?" And she said, "Oh, I lost." And I said, "Wow, yeah, how did that happen?" And then she came out with this chilling comment, and you're probably guessing what it was. "You were not there to tell me what to do." And I thought, wow, does that mean my players can only play when I tell them what to do? What sort of player or players am I developing? And so that was a real light bulb moment, and it made me to start thinking about different ways of coaching. So the coaching environment that we think sets up the player and the coach to be most effective is when the coach implements and uses a coach-led, athlete-centered coaching approach. I would think that many of you may have heard of athlete-centered coaching, but Carleen, in her research a few years back, coined it as a coach-led, athlete-centered coaching approach because the coach is still fully involved in the program, although the athlete is very clearly the center of the program, and together they have to move forward. Some coaches seem to think that if we allow the athletes to be the center, then we would lose control of the program. And some coaches like to feel that they're in control. And often they would turn around when I had a discussion with them and say, "Well, you know, I guess this is all about playing games and not developing skills." To which I would answer, no, there's still a very strong focus on developing the required skills for whatever game you're playing. And in this case, squash. And Mike might tell you about how he develops the required skills for his Harvard players. So then we move into the area called a games-based approach. There are various titles that go along with this. Teaching games for understanding is one, and that's been used and it's been developed. And this is where the learned skills can be practiced in a competitive and a non-competitive way. So they're learning it in a game, and in this game, it's really okay for the players to make mistakes without any criticism. So here we are taking away the fear factor of how some coaches jump on players when they make a mistake, and that does not help the athletes or the players develop their own self-confidence. And lastly, as we all like to think, but whether we do, that practice must be enjoyable and meaningful. Otherwise, why would they come back to the next session? So that's just a quick look at the coaching environment. And my last part is to delve into one of the chapters in the books, which talks about the coaches as facilitators and mentors. And here we go back to the title of our presentation. So in our research, we felt that coaches, to develop decision makers, need to start with helping their students become students of the game. So what does that mean? So I take that to mean they must understand the game of squash. They must watch it. They must talk to people about it. And they should really become experts at whatever level they are. And this could start with young players as well as some of the older players that we come across. They have to understand and play their game. So they really need to know what type of player they are. And that leads us into knowing their own strengths and weaknesses. So they're pretty clear that what they know what is within their ability to achieve. And then the last part would be to appreciate the state of the game. So, the game of squash changes, it's situational, as is coaching, whether it's the start of a 5-game match, whether it's the third game of the match where you're 2 down, or whether you're trying to close out a game and it's very tight. So all of these states of the game will influence the decision making, and we're trying to encourage players to understand that, and that will help their decision making. Well, that's enough from me, and I'm very happy here to welcome Mike to the presentation.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Are we exiting so I can write on my board? We're going to exit the slide,
You
or
certainly
is it
can.
on the speaker?
Let's see. Stop sharing.
Is that good?
That should be better. Yep.
Just so I can write on the board here. Okay, hi everybody. So yeah, Dave said some things there that I just want to reinforce, which is and about Carlene's work, which I would put under the heading when it's sort of, I don't think it can be necessarily student led, but what there has to be is buy-in. So I'll just tell you one simple thing we do here on decision making in our program. And some of you guys I've worked with, so you know this, we put it under the heading wrong shot not. So if a conversation happens with a young squash player after a game, the opportunity is lost, but it's also lost with good players at the end of a rally, because the rallies are so bloody long a lot of the time. So in wrong shot not, what we do is we interrupt the rally immediately the wrong shot has been played. And of course, here we're not talking about the subtlety of mixing up the ball maybe in the front of the court as much as the black and white situation. So missed volley opportunities or obvious straights that should be played instead of cross court. Now you're going to laugh at this, but what we've done many years ago, when I first came down, I bought a step ladder. So the 2 assistant coaches run the teams programs every day, and I work with 2 athletes at a time, and I live on top of a step ladder. So my head is actually in the court. So I'm not yakking on all the time. I'm talking quietly to them through their technical skills and so on. But when we come to do wrong shot not, it could be a condition game, it could be a regular game, but they understand it, but it's not a challenge match. I think Carlene's going to fire some questions about challenge matches and what we do here from the mental perspective in a little bit. But in wrong shot not, I'm at the top of the ladder, and whatever the shot we're working on, we first of all agreed that we need to make an adjustment. So we've done video review, we've done some analysis, they've agreed with the coach that we need to address some performance goals. And when we've drawn up a very simple program, simple drills with no choice, drills with choice, condition games with no choice, condition games with choice. And now we're into this practice game mode. In a condition game, I might also be playing a wrong shot not in the condition game. So in the wrong shot not, I stop the rally immediately. Now, if you've got a younger athlete or an athlete playing without thought, they're just reacting to a situation, this can be a little annoying in the beginning, but it doesn't last long. Within a number of rallies, a number of minutes, things settle down and the rallies get longer. With my top guys, if I'm on the top of the ladder, and let's say we're doing a length plus kill game, and they select a cross kill on the volley, and I think a straight volley kill would be better, I might just quietly say that even during the rally. But there's an understanding between the coach and the player that there's going to be these interjections. And of course, what we're trying to do is to take our black and white situations and put them on an autopilot. So not every player, of course, some players are trying to do too much from attacking positions. or from non-attacking positions, what we call half opportunities. But this is really for those players in our program here at the middle of the ladder and to the bottom that are either fearful of the volley or fearful, very common, of taking it short, or they still have the residual over cross-courting, as an example, from their junior days. It could be as simple as a backhand serve return. So if we've agreed that the backhand serve return should be hit more straight, and right out of the blocks they do a cross court, I'll stop the rally and we'll play a lead. Now there's two ways to progress through this. Sometimes I interject and the rally goes on. Sometimes I interject and a let is played. And then sometimes if we've had one or two lets of the same situation, it'll be a loss of point. Now there's two things that we're trying to do here. One, we're trying to deposit to the technical file. So the technical file, I mean, if you think of the most common one here we all work with is, let's say, the drop shot. So I've got my ball machines down here, the guys come out, and maybe I've got them in a program 3 times where they hit, let's say, 500 backhand drops. And then we do drops in drills, drops in condition games. So I'm trying to take the technical aspects of the drop shot towards feel. So we take technique towards feel. But I need to do the condition games and the games because I need this drop shot to be put into the subconscious file. So I'm going to give you a real example that's going on or did go on most of this season with a player you may recognize the name of just because he's our #1 here and he's about to turn pro full time, and that's Victor Kwan. So Victor's a very, very easy lad to be with. He's very open, but there were a couple of holes, as there are in everyone's game. And he just needed a little more variety on the volley position, both backhand and forehand. So we decided the first shot to bring in, he's got his volley drop, he's got his volley kill straight. He's got his hard volley cross-court kill or deep kill, but he hasn't got a slice cross-court volley kill. Whether you look at it the way, say, a Dave Palmer would hit it, or maybe how Jonathan used to hit it, whomever, there's different ways to hit this shot. But we wanted to add this shot to his arsenal, his weaponry. So #1, we're practicing this shot with the ball machine. #2, we're putting it into very simple drills, 2-man drills. And then we're putting it into condition games. So a condition game might be a cyborg game or an alley game, as they call them down here, with a cross-court slice kill on the volley on the mid-court. And we'll do that. So we're doing this 2-3 times a week. We're then looking at it in practice games. And there's a statement here that is a very important statement, and it changed my whole approach to teaching the mental side of things. And the statement is from a psychologist, a sports psychologist, Kathy Crossland. The mind grabs hold of the strongest memory in the subconscious file. So the mind grabs hold of the strongest memory in the subconscious file. So I refer to that, my interpretation of that is most repeated, first selected. So just going off on a tangent here. So as an example, if the self-judgment's going on and the athlete is saying, oh my God, what are you doing? You'll be off the team, you know, you're dropping down, coach, you'll be upsetting the coach, whatever it is. If they say that all the time, that'll be the first memory that will jump into their head under stress. This statement from Kathy Crossland is about when we're under stress. But the same thing happens when the player is under stress from a tactical perspective. That is why the first shots that are not played when the stress is high in a player, the first shots are not played at the volley drop, maybe the first one not played, followed by the drop shot, and then we see more cross courts. We even see this at the top. So I talk to Ali Farag on a fairly regular basis, and you may not know this, you may have observed it, but his least favorite shot, and this is not uncommon when he's nervous, is the straight forehand drive from the back right. So we can see, even at the very top, we can see when the stress goes up, that tactical decisions are limited and restricted, and they regress to their comfort. So that when I say comfort, I'm talking about something that is relative. It's relatively comfortable to hit the ball cross court. So the whole idea of adding to this file, so we've got to add to the mental file, and we want to add to this shot file, and we've got to put the requisite number of shots, hundreds and then into the thousands, and to be honest, in the tens of thousands, into the hand for feel, but we've got to now put it into the head so that under pressure, not in a defensive situation, you understand, that the mind will still go and grab hold of that shot as an option. They may not play the shot. Of course, they're going to play the shot based on the outcome of the attacking of the previous time they were in that attacking position. So how shots are selected is according to the outcome of the previous time they're in position. So if I'm in a forehand volley position, let's say a weak cross court from back left, and I take a volley drop and I win with it, I remember that shot, and the next time it comes up, I'm actually going to do it again. I'm actually going to keep doing it until something not negative happens, but something where it's not as strong a feedback. And then I make my adjustment. So there's this constant awareness and evaluation in a split second as to what shot the player is going to hit. So the purpose of, we've got the drills, the condition games, and then the games. And the important thing here with video review to support it is what I'm trying to do is to make sure that there's a deposit into this file so that under stress in a tough match, the player may still go and play that attacking shot. So I think on that one, that was the example I was going to give. So I think maybe I'll stop there. Quit while you're ahead. Am I handing over to Carleen, or is it the next topic? What is it? Or is it question time?
I think it is coming my way. I think it is. We're gonna try and pivot now, as I guess use that word, into a little bit more of a Q&A, and I'll start by sending some questions your way. But before I begin, I just want to acknowledge and show appreciation to the work and the place where I live and play and gather and learn as the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations on the West Coast in Vancouver. So as we, like I said, pivot to a little bit more of a Q&A, I did want to try and get a little bit more audience participation at this point. So I will try and navigate if attendees do have questions, that if you want to either raise your hand on Zoom and I can filter through some of those hands, and or you can put a question in the chat and then I can try and filter through those as well. So I've got both screens and we can try and see how much I've learned from teaching on Zoom for the last little bit. So I was thinking about this last night. It actually felt like a little bit like a coach's corner that I've kind of got with Mike here. So a chance to kind of throw some questions your way based on things that we had been talking about before this and previous days. But something that's come up that is a phrase that I've used in my previous work, sort of in the kinesiology world, is this idea of putting tools in somebody's toolbox. And I guess that kind of runs akin a little bit to when you're talking about different files that people have. But I was just wondering how you might go about, and appreciating that you do work with very elite athletes, but how you might go about appreciating sort of pre-match, like pre-season, as you get student athletes coming to you and working within your program. How do you work through progressing different players' tools and different players' abilities, appreciating that they're coming from different places or that you've got them over many years, and so that they have the necessary tools in their files to pull in the moment when they get into that stress situation in a game? So can you kind of comment on how you might prep different shots or make sure that everybody's got the certain array of shots as sort of components of the files that you're then working with?
Yeah. So, and I think all this is also gonna, because we were discussing yesterday, we're going to talk a little bit about challenge matches and mental training, and these all go in there. So first of all, just to clarify something here. So the top guys on both teams are very strong, and you would classify them as elite. But our ladder, you know, there's 9 matches count. The women's squad is 14 this year. The men's squad is 12, 13. And there's quite an array. And we've got walk-ons. So we go down. You would classify all the players as probably advanced, but I don't know that the guys at the bottom. So it's quite a range here. The most important thing is, for me as a coach, is that we have to have buy-in, and it's not always the easiest thing. And I've told this story before. I'm going to tell it again now very quickly. You know, when Ali Farag came here, you can imagine the gap between Ali Farag and the next guy on the team was quite big. And Ali was not interested in doing mental programs. In fact, he was very polite, and he's got a beautiful Egyptian English accent. And he loves to tell me, you know, Mike, because I was trying to get him to do a mental program, and he said, you know, Mike, we don't do mental programs in Egypt. We just play squash, and you know, there's not much that a coach can do with that. So instead of me pushing it on him, what I really had to do was to wait, and what I had to do was to wait for him to falter. And the first match he lost, which was against Todd Harrity, again, he didn't want to address mental training because he just felt he had a bad day in the office. But his second loss, which was to Amar Khalifa, a fantastic young squash player and a world junior champion, he beat Ali in the finals of the World Junior Championships. But after that loss, Ali really lost control. He had 3 match balls, 2-love, 3 match balls in the third game, and then he just spiraled down. He lost that third game. He lost it. So the most important thing is to get the buy-in. And I'm starting with the mental side of it because I think it's one of the most important ones. And it's very tough to get buy-in from some athletes. So some athletes think of, they think that the mental programs are to do with we use this term mentally tough. So if we think of mentally tough athletes, we get a picture maybe of LeBron James or Nadal, Baggy, Serena Williams, but we don't necessarily think of mentally tough when we think of maybe Roger Federer or Osaka or certain other athletes. So the first thing is and from this, the athlete may judge themselves as that Victor is tough, but I'm not built like that. So they label themselves. And this labeling, we have to get them through this labeling aspect. The other hurdles to mental training come when you present it to them. And a mental program, of course, is a very simple thing. And it looks almost too easy. It's like it's too easy. And they confuse the fact that an easy program can't be effective. They confuse that. So the most important thing with anything we do here is to do with buy-in. I have to get the athlete to buy in, whether it's a mental program or a technical or tactical program. If it's a technical aspect, then I'm going to use video review, and I'm going to look at their base technique, and then what I call their base technique under pressure. So we've got the base technique, forehand and backhand drive. Does it check the boxes that we want checking? Can you control the ball? Is it consistent? Does it deliver power? Does it deliver power efficiently? Does it deliver power efficiently? And then we're looking at that under pressure. Under pressure, you know, when your opponent's hitting a hard attacking drive, is it working under pressure? Can you get it out of the corners? Whatever the shot is. So the holes in their game, the holes technically, the holes with, say, advanced, what I call advanced basics, and then going through all the shots. So we come out. So the most important thing, without a shopping list, I'm not going at this, I'm being broad here on this Zoom, but without a shopping list, is to agree, to have a starting point. We're going to agree 1 or 2 things on technique, usually, 1 or 2 things on certain shots, 1 or 2 things tactically. So there's not a whole shopping list. I mean, right now, and for a little while, I've been trying to get, you know, Victor never used the Pakistani slap drive as an example. He didn't have enough pace on the ball. So as good as he was, and his backhand drive still catches the side ball. So even at the top of the ladder, we can still get some buy-in with video review. And we agree, we can prioritize it, and now we can go forwards. And I think that that is the most important thing. And you talked about earlier, Carleen, about that it's athlete center or athlete driven. And I don't disagree with that. But my job as the coach is to lead them, you know, a little carrot on the end there, and with intelligent reviewing, and just take them down. And then going to other pros. So it's a technical thing. You know, I've done this many times, and some guys have heard me do this too often. But I do this, I draw a simple box on almost everything I do. And I just call this the box of pro average. So if I've got an athlete, so at the bottom of my women's team, if I draw a ladder here, I got a few guys outside of the pro average box on their footwork. I've got a new kid coming in next year, one of the best kids in the world from Ecuador, and his footwork is not in the pro average box. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show videotape of top players. I'm going to show them themselves, and I'm going to tell them why we need to make this adjustment, whether it's footwork, first position on the backhand, follow through, whatever it is, or a particular shot, and get them to agree that they'd like to be in what I call this pro average box. Some coaches, you know, their pro average box, if they were using the same metaphor as I'm using, sometimes it's the size of a postage stamp. We don't want that, okay? But all pros, if you talk to pros, so forever and a day, you know, back in the 90s or late 90s, maybe early 2000s, the favorite pro from professionals technically was probably Stu Boswell. And then when Shabana came along, Shabana became, and I'm talking about 7, 8, 9 out of 10 pros would say, I would just ask the question, who's your favorite player technically? Amr Shabana. Okay, whoa, okay. So, you know, you take, and again, it's not to say that there's only one way to do it or it's this way, but it's just to sort of have a framework. And I don't care, all the pros in the world, for the most part, are in here. If you took Ramy Ashour a few years ago, you might not put him in here with his backhand, with that grip on the thumb position, but, you know, he may be outside the box, but you're not going to use his skills and say, well, I'm going to coach the way he hits the ball for my kid. So, you know, you have to, that's to do with your methodology. It's like the Jim Furyk from the golf world. All right. You have your own methodology. But anyway, so that's what I do. Buy-in is the number one thing for me, technically, tactically, and then I'm bringing in Rong Shan, and then I'm trying to entice them to do a mental program.
Thanks for that, Mike. You've touched on one thing right at the end there of having, and your example that you used was using footwork into your pro average box. Yeah. What are some other either tactical, mental pieces that you would also have a pro average box for, and that you would be considering for?
Well, I'm going to use this for pretty much everything. So the pro average box would be, if you think of Rong Shan Knight, so think of black and white tactical choices. Well, you know, you don't, if you get a bad ball from the back left corner down the middle, it's going to go to the front right until the opponent is running up the court. It's like you think of an alley game. In an alley game, when a kid plays an alley, it's a 2-corner game. In an alley game, most junior players and club players keep hitting the ball to the back, and then every now and again they think they should put the ball to the front, but it's a 2-cornered game. If you're in the middle and the guy's behind you, the only corner to hit the ball to is in the front. And when do you change that? Well, you change it when they scurry out of the corner, anticipating, and they're over anticipating, and now you send it deep. So, you know, footwork for technique, striking the ball technique, tactical black and whites. But you can also be, you know, what's an average? You can't really maybe say there's an average strength program, but you can look at strength and conditioning, and you can say some things are out of the box. Maybe they're out of the box is on a time frame, what's in season, what's out of season. So sometimes it's very pertinent. And of course, I've got to be careful with the technical box. In season, I'm probably going to leave that puppy alone. This is early season. But a lot of this stuff comes up because of the challenge matches that we do. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday, and Dave made a point as how much discomfort there can be in a program because of challenge matches, and they may fracture a team or whatever. When I came to Harvard, the team selection at this school and at most others was based in purely subjectively. So it's not that I want my guys to have stressful encounters every week with each other, but I want them to have the maturity to be able to do that. But what I really want is I want stress, pending stress, so that I can rehearse a mental program. So if you do a mental program and there's no matches coming up, then there's no buy-in and they'll float off. So we have a challenge match every week, and the challenge match sorts out the order of the ladder, even though there's still a little bit of subjectivity left for the coach. But what it's really doing, it's allowing these guys to be immersed in stress. So in our program, we call it guided stress or stress with answers. So if you, me and Dave are on a ladder and you're ranked above me, when I challenge you, if I challenge you and beat you, I go above you. But if I'm challenging you, I've got some mental freedom here. We call this arrow up. Arrow up is free to play. You are better than me. You have an expectation, a higher expectation. You are expected to win. We call this arrow down stress. Mental training is about arrow down stress. And in some programs, in some junior programs and some college programs, this arrow down stress is a lost opportunity. So it's very common in the States here. Some kids have coach only programs. Well, there's no mental stress if it's coach only programs. If there's an avoidance in a program or in a community, a squash community, of playing people that they don't like or don't like losing to, then they miss these opportunities. It's not throwing them in the deep end for the sake of them to experience the stress. Although in many cases in sport, it is assumed that the kid will toughen up, which they may well do, through just being immersed in stress. But there needs to be a plan, and that's where the mental program comes in. So in our program, our guys know that on Monday afternoon, there will be a challenge match, and we will start the mental training. We'll do the program on a Friday, just because of the way the week and the training week works. Saturday's a day off, Sunday's a short hit and a revisit, and then a short revisit of the mental program. Now, if we do that on a regular basis, we drip into this mental training file, and we're going to make some real progress. If we don't do that and we only leave it to the outside matches, and the early matches are very tough, then we're actually going to be playing with a depleted hand. So we've got to make these deposits. We've got to get the buy-in. We've got to make the deposits. We've got to start at the right time in the right way. And we have to lay out the plan, and the plan's got to have some intelligence about it, so it speaks to the athlete. And from there, we can make progress, because we are all in this together. We are in this together. My job is to help and guide you. Your job is to take it on. I know it's stressful, but we're going to give you some answers, and we're going to guide you through.
Great. We've got one question actually come through the chat from Kit. And so it says, what advice would you offer to a player who tends to win their games more often when they're ahead in points, but lose more often when they find themselves down a few points?
Right. So in our program here, we look at the phases in matches. So there are some common phases, and then the higher up the ladder, the more subtle, and you have micro phases. So let me just list a few. And this is an important one for our Egyptians. So we have 3 Egyptians in the program now, and here's a conversation I had again with Ali Farag. So he's playing a practice match, and he loses the first game badly. Practice match, and so I come up and I told him, I said, Ali, come on, let's, your energy's down. And he just, again, he just goes, well, I always lose the first game in practice matches. You always lose the first game in practice matches. What are you depositing here, if that's your thought process? And he said, well, it's very common in Egypt. He said, lots of players just lose the first game. So the first phase that I address to my players is what we call playing to settle, playing into confidence. So they've done the warm-up, they've done the dynamic warm-up off court, they've gone through a little mental rehearsal, they're on the court, they come off, they grab a drink. They may or may not talk to a coach or a teammate, and they've got an instruction and they play the first phase. We talk about this to our guys, not every day, but every week, a few times. Because when we settle and play, we feel better. So what we want to feel, real confidence is about comfort. And as I said earlier, it's a relative thing. So I want to play and settle, which means that I move well. And of course, my body's catching up physiologically, because you get into a bit of oxygen debt early, especially when the rallies are longish. But the length is that they find their length, they're moving well, they're lifting out of trouble. And we actually refer to this as, it's usually what I call a length plus kill game. There may be drop opportunities early, but we're playing to settle. So phase number one. Second phase, to understand and be clear, is the adjustment in the head after 2 or 3 unforced errors in close succession. All right. Third phase that we rehearse is when the score is critical. This was a phase that Victor Quat, this was the biggest phase for him to lose. So in his first season here, so this year he beat Andrew Douglas twice. And in his first season, he lost to him 3 or 4 times. And he lost always in critical score phase. So that's a longer conversation that I won't go into in here, but there's some momentum aspects there. Who got to game ball first? Were you up, or did the other player come back? And then the other phases would be when you're feeling tired, but not just when you're tired. Can you anticipate that you're going to run out of steam, and are you making adjustments? So there's an awareness there. And then the last phase, under the 5 most obvious ones, would be those days when you don't feel good, your feet aren't moving, or you can't find the ball. So we call it's B game day, and B as in backup. And we want to be clear on B game day, because if you don't accept that it's a B game day, then you won't execute very well. And if you only execute 80% of B game, it becomes a C game. So I lay out the phases, and with the video reviews, we notice the habitual aspects that come up for each player as to how they play each phase. So I would say, was it to Kim? I can't remember. Kit, sorry, Kit. So I would say to Kit, is it worth doing video review and getting the buy-in? Maybe the player's already bought in. And then, so this is an habitual thing. So it's a phase that the player goes through and needs to address. And then what might the tools be? So now we've got to go to a mental program. So first of all, we raise awareness. Then we bring in a mental program. There's some visualizing, there's some scripting, there's the words and phrases, the triggers, there's play like, be like. So they've gone through what I call a comprehensive but simple mental program. Then there's an awareness in the moment. So during a practice match or a challenge match, which would be better, we see the player going to the wall, wipe the hand, take a breath, reset. And now, okay, I've been here before. I know what to do. Right now, I need to ... Now, that I need to does not mean they're going to win the next rally. It doesn't mean that. And this is important on the video review. It means that they're going to execute the plan correctly, whatever that looks like. So they've caught whatever needed to be caught, the voice in the head, random boast from the back, whatever needs to be caught, you get the gist. And that would be, for me, that would be a good start.
I hope that answered your question, Kit. One of the ones come up here, and I know it's something that we've been talking about before. Your thoughts on coaching the 90-second break, and given that 90 seconds is a relatively short time, how much information can somebody process in 90 seconds that then can be turned into meaningful practice in the game coming up? So just a couple of thoughts maybe on your approaches or your messaging when coaching the 90-second break.
Well, I doubt if I'll say anything new here, but what is really important is that before the tournament before the match, that the coach and the teammates, if they're teammates or, friends in a junior player, understand with the player what the player likes. So I'll give you an example here. What we see a lot in college squash is a swarm around the athlete. Okay. And I'm not kidding you. In some matches, we will see up to 6 people in our opposition standing around a player. Everyone's got an opinion. Everyone wants it out there and so on. So we first of all, with the athlete, who do you like to speak to you between games, or do you? How do you like that to happen? And then there's an intuitive aspect here. So we'll give an example with Jonathan. If I was at an event with Jonathan, I was coaching Jonathan, usually the first thing I would do, if he lost the game, I would actually remove the water bottle so he wouldn't, practice his backhand drive against it or throw something across the arena. But the first thing was to say nothing. The first thing is space. Let them breathe. Let them get a drink. Calm down. Then again, I've had this communication with the athlete, but I like to ask the athlete, what do they think? Now, if it's really fundamental and obvious when they've won, then it's all about, you're playing well. I love what you're doing. So when Victor just won the individual title against Yusuf, and he just really played well. There were very few adjustments in the conversation. It was 5 games, and there were very few adjustments. He was very clear on the game plan. We'd agreed the game plan, and there were very few adjustments. So that was about reinforcing. So what I like space. I like to ask them. I don't do this with every athlete. So I know my athletes well. Some are not looking, they're not looking for me to ask a question. I just tell them 1, 2, 3. There should be no more than 3 instructions. I'm going to repeat the positive. There'll be no more than 3 instructions. And I will say the 3 instructions at least twice, maybe 3 times, or with a less experienced player, I will have them repeat it back to me after I've said it twice. I make sure that I talk in bullet form. I talk how I'm talking now, short, sharp, and I add the tone where the tone is required and necessary. And again, that comes to knowing your athlete. If I was coaching Shahir Razik back in the day, I would use a very strong tone against Shahir because it would wake him up. What are you doing? Man, bum, 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 bum. Oh. And he would play better. But you wouldn't use that tone against Graham Riding. You'd never use a tone like that against Jonathan. He'd hit you. So, you know your athlete, you need a tone, but there's got to be, you understand it, and you have a discussion, and then you police so there's not a swarm around them, and then you decide again. A lot of it is intuitive.
Great. Thanks, Mike. One other one here from Andrew. For those parents and juniors who think that it is better for their development to always play people who are better, what suggestions can you give to help them understand the value of experiencing a reasonable number of those arrow down situations?
I got to tell you that, thank you for asking that, Andrew, because that it just drives me batty, absolutely drives me batty. So let's just be clear for everyone here. If the kid is only playing with the coach, playing kids better, they are all ways in an arrow up situation. And it's not just arrow up mentally. They're completely free to play. By the way, parents and some coaches, but parents evaluate their kids in arrow up situations. So little Jenny played the number 4 seed in the tournament and she lost 3-1. And she was absolutely miraculous. She looked fantastic. She goes into the consolation and she loses 3-2 to someone that she would have beaten 3-love had she played the same way. In America, when parents witness that, some parents will think, I need to change coaches. I need a sports psychologist. What's going wrong here? So kids in arrow up situations, let's be really clear about this from a tactical point of view. They do not get volley opportunities as much. They do not get attacking opportunities as much. they do not experience the stress in the head. So they may improve their defensive skills. That's great. It's important. But the critical difference makers for a competitive junior athlete is how they deal with the voice in the head. So even when we're not doing actually a mental program, when a kid goes on court with another kid, same age group, similar level, there is stress. And even without a mental program, they're actually learning to deal with it. They may not be learning that much. They may be sort of plodding slowly. They may be tripping themselves up. But this is critical. So it is absolutely essential to have arrow across. Remember, arrow across same level is mentally arrow down. Arrow across is arrow down because there is expectation. There has to be a regular part. I'm not sure that I would put a number on it, but I can tell you now that in our program here, the players, because they're all playing each other in their groups, so there's no drill busting going on, but they are absolutely in arrow down situations a few times a week. And in the challenge matches, that's where it's the test. So what we say, okay, we test you with your practice games and the drills and the condition games at the end of sessions, and then you take an exam. You take an exam every Monday. That's the challenge match. We videotape that exam. We review the exam. We know what the performance goals are from the previous one. We agree. We talk about what was going on. The review must be done the next day or within 2 days of the match. And then we regroup. They all have books. They all make notes. They're not writing shopping lists. There's very small adjustments. And we three coaches are aware of what those adjustments are. And then we go at it again. It's a drip, drip, drip. It's the term is incremental. It's an incremental program. I don't know if I answered the question fully, but I feel very strongly about it. So Andrew, thank you for bringing that up. Critical.
I think there's also, I think it's a follow-up or continuation for it. And Dave's asking, how early do you think to start teaching junior players to improve their decision-making or to work through these different types of games or put them increasingly more in arrow down situations maybe?
Well, as I would say, as soon as they're proficient enough to hit the ball straight, because when they start, they hit everything cross court and down the middle. But as soon as, simple stuff, just make the guy run. So it starts early, but it doesn't start in that sort of heavy structured. It's almost like, it's not what I call, say, coaching or teaching. It's more like you're guiding. It's like you're suggesting, hey, come on, you're hitting the ball back to me. You're hitting the ball back to Jimmy. Make them run, make them run. So it's all about the fun, the fun of the all coaches, we know this instinctively. But yeah, does it start early? It starts early. Not on day one, but it starts early.
Fair enough. All right. Well, that's, unless there's any other questions that pop up in the chat, or if anybody feels free to raise their hand or unmute themselves and ask a question. I think we've kind of reached a point where we can open the floor up if there are any questions maybe for Dave or additional ones for Mike. If not, I think I can ask one more maybe.
Okay.
Having watched a little bit of the Hal Cup via the YouTube channel when it was happening live and seeing the competitive nature of the matches on court, and sure, the score lines ended up what they ended up, but maybe if you can just quickly talk about how you seemed, and from the camera, seemed to stay so calm through something that was, you're playing in the national championship, been there before, sure. Yeah. But as somebody so experienced from you, what is it that you had felt so confident in with your athletes' abilities or the prep that you had done leading into that to look so calm or to seem so controlled in such a high stressed environment?
It's all smoke and mirrors. So look, the most important thing is to lighten the load. Is we have to step back from sports stress, number one. And when the women's team, before they go out there, I always want to make my guys laugh right before the heat of battle. Okay. So I mean, I tell them, you know, not on a daily basis, but I'll always throw something out. You know, we're not solving world hunger here, for crying out loud. And my shoes. So so don't go out. I'm going to be 3 seconds. So everything's about perspective. So I didn't realize this, of course, until, so I'm wearing blue. I'm wearing the colors of Ukraine. So that might seem like a heavy thing, but there were 2 girls from Ukraine playing in the championship finals and the semis onwards. So there's got to be something that allows the athlete and the coach to step back. That would be number 1. Number 2, we've already done the work. There's really not much more for me to do. Number 3, I want my guys to be able to see the old man as calm and clear and collected, and that's my responsibility. But there's no question the fact that all the years of doing that, you know, and being in stressful situations with the players back in Canada has helped, and over the years here. So I think, but I do think it's important. It's important that the coach has his own set. No, you're not doing a mental program as such, but you have a switch in your head. And you should be able to activate that switch that takes you to the best place that you can be to see things with clarity, and also to give off the right amount of energy, and the right energy, respectful energy. And we always refer to the culture in our program as being, this is the way we do things here.
One last question has come in from the chat, and I think it is an interesting one as a fan back in the day, to ask, how was your experience with Jonathan and Graham?
Oh, well, now I don't. I don't keep in close contact. I'm probably in touch with Graham a few times a year. Jonathan once or twice. Love to see him when I do, but they're all, you know, I've got a busy life, they've got a busy life. I talk to Razik all the time. I feel like I'm Razik's dad, but there you go.
All right, thanks for that, Mike. Jeff, I've seen you come back on camera here, so I think we're just about at the end of our time.
Yes, thank you, Carlene, and thank you to Mike and Dave for today's valuable and educational presentation on tactical decision making in squash. I would like to think everyone took a number of valuable pieces away from today's presentation that they can now implement into their coaching going forward. So yes, thank you, Dave, Carlene, Mike. Going forward, for everybody still on today's presentation, just a friendly reminder that we've got a couple of Coach PD webinars coming up in April. We've got one on April 6th called Teaching Life Skills Through Sport by Glenn Mulcahy, and that's Paradigm Sports. We've had him on a number of times. And then we also have one on April 19th, Optimizing Mindset, Outlook, and Performance by Ahad Raza, who I believe actually is one of Dave's former U of T athletes as well. So a couple of great presentations in April. We look to have a few more in May and June, and then we'll take a break for the summer. So if anyone has ideas for presentations, please let me know and we'll get those scheduled. Otherwise, thank you everybody for attending today's Coach PD webinar, and to our presenters, have a wonderful afternoon, and we will see you at the next webinar.
Thanks, guys. Lots of fun.